So hello and welcome to a special feature from MCC Brussels. I'm Jacob Reynolds, and this week we're taking a deeper look at Germany. Germany's been in the headlines following the collapse of Olaf Scholz's government and the triggering of fresh elections next year. But what has precipitated this collapse? For us, there are two really important factors. The first is the political crisis of representation that's been plaguing Germany for some time, and the second is the growing economic crisis which Germany is facing. People will have seen this illustrated in loads of news headlines about companies either downsizing or leaving Germany altogether. It seems that this is more than just a collapse of a government, more than just an ordinary day-to-day political problem, but in fact raises profound questions about where Germany is and where it's heading. To shed some light on this, we assembled some great experts to help talk us through what's gone wrong for Germany. First, I sat down with our research director, Professor Werner Patzelt. Werner is one of the world's leading experts on all things Germany, and especially about the crisis of political representation in Germany.
The basic problem we have in Germany is that we have a right-wing majority among the population, and this right-wing majority among the population is always confronted with center-left governments. And so there was a growing dissatisfaction by a growing majority even of the Germans with the migration policies, with the attempts of the government to regulate industry, German Green Deal and so on. So they really were dissatisfied with this government. And at the same time, it was quite clear that there would be no alternative government because nobody wants to enter a coalition or even some informal form of cooperation with the Alternative for Germany, with the AfD. So this tensions between what a majority among the population wanted to be the case and what the political class was willing to offer, those tensions needed to explode, and they exploded in the decline of the prestige of the government, in the dissatisfaction with the leadership by Scholz, and they will even go on to explode these tensions during the electoral campaign, because the only thing the Christian Democratic Union can promise is that they will be the party of the Chancellor and that they will go on in a coalition government with the Social Democrats, therefore continuing exactly those policies which have to lead to current Germany's problems. It is true that during the long chancellorship of Angela Merkel, so many Germans had the feeling, well, we are the strongest economic power in Europe, we enjoy so much political stability, our society is able to digest 1 million, 2 million, 3 million of migrants, not every year, but in the course of 4 or 5 years, no problem whatsoever, we will grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And now people felt, and even in their personal lives, that our changing energy policies, our migration policies, changed the life world of so many people in Germany and not to the better side. For a long while, German media, who usually were in deep sympathy with Angela Merkel and a, green social democratic course of our policies, for a long while the media succeeded in making Germans believe that we won't have any problems, neither with security, public security, neither with imported criminal actions of migrants, neither with our economy. They made people believe that green politics would lead to a new, so to speak, economic miracle in German economic history. And all these things did not survive the contact with reality. And now reality has broken into the walls of German political illusions, and this is resented by the population. And since the population, as I put it before, has the feeling that it will go on as it has been going on during the last decade, more migration, more, green energies, more bureaucratic regulation of society, because the people have the feeling this goes on, that there is no hope for a really change in German policies, this depression in public opinion is going to last at least for 1 or 2 years. What we have seen during the last 10, 15 years was the fulfillment of all the visions, desires and political hopes of two generations of young Germans. They were brought up in a situation of stability, prosperity. The only problems to be solved were the problems of humankind, because all German problems were solved or had been solved. Germany was transforming Europe to its better, so everything was settled here. And so the horizon of German policy making was the whole world and was the future of humankind. Due to the climate policies that we had to make, we would save the world climate from Germany, which was quite ridiculous from the beginning. But there was so much ideological self-understanding and pride of the own country and its achievements that nobody wanted to hear that there were certain limits of German growth, of German capacities, and this, so to speak, life lies of a whole generation now are revealed as what they are, absolute illusions. So Germany felt to be on a wonderful course, moral champion of the world, humanitarian champion, a big role model for the rest of the world, as it is German's destiny since the 19th century, to put it in an ironic way. And these illusions have come to an end, which is healthy for Germany, but like the end of all severe medical problems, the end is not as comfortable as the beginning. Now comes the AfD, the big surprise for German domestic policies, because when this party came into existence 10 years ago, everybody expected this party to disappear like all German right-wing parties have disappeared. The AfD, without any perspective to exert political power, but as the authentic voice of that right-wing population majority, which dislikes the left-green woke political course entered by Angela Merkel and continued by the Christian Democrats to this day, the AfD will not go at federal elections be beyond, presumably, 20%. This is a maximum as far as I see the trends right now, the AfD can achieve on federal level. So there would be a naturally in quotation marks by the way, a natural coalition between the Christian Democratic Union and the AfD, reflecting as a parliamentary majority, the right-wing majority among the German population. And there is so much policy agreement in the manifestos of the Christian Democratic Union and the AfD that it could be possible if politics were made with an accent on rationality and not with an accent of, well, friend or foe, with whom do I want to enter a coalition, with whom to cooperate will put me in danger of being too seriously criticized by the media and losing prestige. So at the end, we will have a strong AfD, we will have a coalition government led by the Christian Democratic Union, which cannot change the course of German policy making and which will contribute to further frustration on part of the German population. I forgot about the Green Party. The Green Party will certainly enter the parliament, will end up with presumably something like 8%, but it will not be sufficient to mark German policies as the Green Party achieved to do during the traffic light coalition. Maybe the Christian Democrats are urged to enter a coalition not only with the Social Democrats but also with the Greens, which will make the dissatisfaction in Germany even stronger than it is right now. So a further winter of dissatisfaction is likely to happen in Germany after the federal elections.
And very quickly, we've mentioned a few topics, but what do you see as being the decisive issues in the election?
The decisive issues will be migration, the war the war of Russia against Ukraine and what policy Germany should pursue. And it is the, economic crisis and the bureaucracy which is strangling German economy. These three things, if trends go on as they appear right now, will be the decisive topics of the federal election campaign.
Next, I sat down with Thomas Meyer. Thomas is one of Germany's leading economists and has featured heavily in major roles right across the financial and economic sector. Thomas is one of the most important economic analysts in Germany. There's an awful lot of talk in the media and in the wider world about the kind of economic crisis gripping Germany. And this is playing a huge role, having massive political ramifications. Everybody understands at some level energy prices, the lack of competitiveness, difficulties in the wider context. But could you just give us your top line view on what you think the current economic difficulties or maybe crisis in Germany consists in?
Yeah, I'm inclined always to reduce the German success formula to one equation. And this equation is combine industriousness of the people, the workforce, with know-how of the entrepreneurs and, again, the workforce, and cheap energy. And then you produce a formidable industry.
What are, and especially for ordinary Germans, what are the kind of symptoms of that crisis? How is the economy being felt by ordinary Germans?
It's strange at this point in time. It's sort of I think in the UK in World War II there was a phase that was called the phony war. War was already declared, but there was no action, and people sat there and were wondering, oh my God, what is happening next? Yeah? But it was clear that war is coming, was declared in a sense. Now we are seeing that the first action comes. We have the announcement by Ford to reduce a significant number of positions in their companies, 2,900 in Cologne. We have the debate about Volkswagen, whether they would close down entire factories. It's clear that they have to save. And we hear, here and there now, especially from companies associated with the big automakers, that if these guys scale down further, they will have to scale down now. So I think we are presently in the transition phase from the phony war to the real war. In other words, people are going to feel now the crisis that so far was hidden under a so far reasonably well-performing labor market.
But are there other areas where this crisis is going to begin to bite? People talk about chemicals and other kind of German specialities, but could you illustrate a few other areas where there's going to be serious difficulties in the near future?
Well, it's basically all energy-intensive industry that is suffering. Aluminium is gone. Steel production is in crisis. They thought that they could turn ThyssenKrupp into a model steel company running on hydrogen rather than coal. Right now, ThyssenKrupp is in big crisis. It's not working. When I talk to people from ThyssenKrupp, they told me, and I asked them, will that work? I mean, can you go on with this? They said, no, it won't work, but maybe we can show the world that there is a model that they can do where the production of hydrogen is cheaper. So steel is a problem. Chemicals is a problem. BASF. What comes on top of that is also government regulation. We talked about it. That research-intensive companies, especially in the pharmaceutical area, they move their research and development away because the regulations, data protection, all these kind of things, are such that they cannot do the clinical tests that are available in other jurisdictions. The bottom line is that it's all that is energy intensive that is suffering, and of course the very important auto sector, which is suffering from technological change. There is a hiatus from the combustion engine to the electric engine. Yes, they can make nice electric cars, but they are expensive and customers don't trust.
For so long, Germany was always given as the example of how to organize both state activity, the educational work, industry, and regulation. Germany was always in Europe given as the example of the kind of model to follow that somehow married both a good traditional, skilled, but working class labor force along with kind of high productivity and high output, and leading to as I say, Germany always held up as the example. What went wrong is the question that people are currently asking. What's your opinion?
The love of the status quo. This, in my view, is the biggest problem. This love of the status quo, this conservativeness this, we don't want to change, we don't want to try new things, we want to have a very nice welfare state, we want to take life a little bit easier. Yeah, this is absolutely counterproductive when you're living in an age of disruption. And this is what I think is the biggest problem for Germany, to get out of this mentality.
We've published reports that looking at the European level at how European regulations have been very hostile to startups and new technology companies. What specifically in Germany have been holding things back? You've talked about the mindset, sense of complacency, but and anything else, especially in these critical new technological sectors?
Well, one thing we touched upon, which is electromobility, where we haven't really achieved the level of infrastructure that the customer would be comfortable with this new technology. Then if you look at AI, big American companies say that they won't train their large language models in Europe or Germany because of the individual data protection rules that the European Union has issued. Then when you look at all the reporting requirements that are imposed on companies, the CRD or whatever, this is this corporate social responsibility directive. I think there are a couple of more letters into it, which I tend to forget always. This imposes huge reporting requirements on companies. They have to trace all their value-added chains back, to whatever they got. Maybe some stones from India are in this thing, and they have to trace it back and make sure that they collect all the carbon dioxide and add it up, and they have to make sure that anyone in this value chain is not using, for instance, child labor.
Yeah, and to continue on that theme of environmental policy and environmental regulation, it also plays into the energy problem that you've outlined as well. How big of an issue is the general environmentalist ethos in the kind of current crisis of the German economy?
Well, we have lived through a period under the reign of Angela Merkel in which people got almost obsessed with climate change. I don't want to play down the threats of climate change, but it turned out to be the number one threat. We had, like many other countries, right? We had this Fridays for Future strike. Greta Thunberg was a hero, and we made commitments that are now falling on our feet. Especially, in my view, this idea that we could run an industrial economy only with renewable energy. That is, I don't know who thinks that this is possible. They have this idea that they can regulate the production and adjust the demand accordingly. So when there is no wind, no sun, then we all take a break. But how can you run a big industrial economy? Germany is not a service economy. You can say, say to the customer, well, the coffee machine is not working right now, come back in half an hour. But we're a big industrial country. And this is a very, very, very big handicap, I think, coming up in the future. And people beginning to realize that one has to find trade-offs. In economics, we always have to find trade-offs. You cannot say this is the only goal and we have to achieve this at all costs and we run the economy into the ground because we want to be the most virtuous country as far as CO2 emissions are concerned, which, by the way, is not working because they have now revved up the coal energy production, and our goals for CO2 emission reductions are gone.
Usually we might, at this point in a discussion, kind of look ahead to the future and point to a few green shoots that we might kind of take some courage from or take some inspiration from. But it seems to me that the kind of peculiar political economic crisis in Germany consists in the fact that, and I'm not asking you to take a political position unless you want to, but that it seems that none of the political alternatives on offer really seem to have a good grasp of the crisis or any suggestion of how to get out of it. Or do you disagree?
There's a famous German poet, Hölderlin, who has a poem where he says that when there is a crisis, then something positive may also emerge. I don't know the English translation of the poem, so I leave it better at this, which basically is, perhaps also fits better to an economist. But look, another year with such a government would have really put us way, way, way behind. But now at least we have a chance. I'm not saying that that Germany can make it, but there's a chance. It is possible. It is thinkable, at least, that the German electorate will see the writings on the wall, and the writings are: do something. If you don't do now, if you don't act now, your wealth is going to go down the drain. If they see this writing on the wall, they might just give a new government a mandate to do what in the past has already been done. In 1982, we had a change in government. From social liberal to black liberal. This was then the Kohl Genscher government that implemented a few reforms. We had in the early 2000s, when the British magazine The Economist dubbed Germany the sick man of Europe, we had the Schröder-Fischer government who did something. And now we have at least a chance that the electorate gives a mandate, and in the present constellation, I can only imagine a CDU-CSU and FDP, free liberal government, so in the German color assortment, black, yellow, that such a government is being elected with a mandate now to make drastic changes. And that is what we need. We need an Agenda 2030, which is more serious than the 2010 that we had under Schröder-Fischer in the early 2000s. In that case, there is at least a chance that we can address these challenges coming from global disruption.
Now, to digest all of this and to think a little bit more about what's coming next for Germany, delighted to present a short conversation between our director, Frank Füredi, and one of our research fellows, Richard Schnek.
Frank, we have heard a political commentary by Werner Patzelt, and we have heard the commentary on the economy by Professor Thomas Mayer. What are your thoughts on the political developments in Germany so far?
Well, it's very exciting because until now, Germany has been the bulwark of reaction to change, bulwark to preventing democracy from gaining a more powerful foothold in Europe. And I think you can see in Germany the gradual unraveling of the mainstream parties, that they are no longer able to enjoy the legitimacy that they possessed in the past. I think when I look at Germany, I'm very much struck by its exceptional role in the sense that it is, almost like the most extreme example of being caught up in the changes that are enveloping Europe. You can see that in terms of its economic crisis. You can see that, for example, in the way in which the German political class is far more censorious and relies upon media manipulation to maintain its role more than anywhere else. You have to remember that Germany stands out as a country where the control of the media is so thoroughgoing. It's almost as if it was a state media, but it doesn't need to be a state media because it's a very domesticated media that doesn't really question the government on essential cultural matters. So I think that the very fact that the media is not being used in the way it is, the way that censorship is being rolled out by the politicians in such a systematic way indicates that they're aware of the fact that they're facing some very major challenges. So in that sense, for me, the German situation is important because I think that its capacity to be the bulwark of anti-democratic politics is going to be seriously undermined, hopefully after February.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually data from the recent European election, but also the state elections in Germany show that the electorate is almost evenly split into two camps. We have one camp who typically above 50-55, mostly retirees who are primarily consuming the public broadcasters and legacy media, and the assessment of the situation in Germany is, and in Europe in general, is far more positive, far more mild than of the other camp. The other camp is typically middle-aged, between 30 and 50, who is working or even working class, and they are actually not consuming as many political informations from the public media, from the legacy media than the other camp, and their assessment of the situation is quite dire, and this is why voting situation also changes. This is a Europe-wide phenomenon, isn't it?
It is. I think you can no longer predict the dynamics of elections anymore. The polls are very often unable to capture the public mood. We saw this yesterday in Romania, where an unexpected individual just completely shot out and gained first position in the presidential election there. I think even in Germany, it's possible that we might underestimate this dynamic, because at the moment there seems to be a consensus that the CDU is guaranteed to have this important first position and will form the government. Probably that's going to happen, but I think that even Germany is not immune for the volatility, the political volatility that exists. And therefore, it's going to be tremendously interesting. But whatever happens, the CDU will not be able to be the CDU the last 10, 15 years. The days of Angela Merkel and that kind of hegemonic role is pretty much gone. And I think what's also important is that the junior partners in any coalition, whether it's the SPD or the Greens, have lost phenomenal amount of credibility. And they will be essentially just making up the numbers rather than being real partners.
Yeah, speaking of the SPD and the Greens, the share of left-leaning, center-left, or even outright leftist parties in the German parliament, according to the current polls, is going to be the lowest since the 1960s. And if this is not this is actually quite representative of the European political landscape nowadays, because both the Social Democrats and the Greens have lost tremendous support in the member states of the European Union. And if now with the Scholz government gone, the flagship product of the European social democracy is Pedro Sanchez's government in Spain, which is a minority cabinet, always in danger of a political crisis. And then after Spain, it becomes very, very thin. You have the next beacon of hope is in the Baltics with Lithuania, Latvia, but Malta. Maybe Romania, although this is a special situation there with the social democracy. So you see, the European social democracy is far from its heydays of the 1970s, where they dominated the European political landscape, and it's not much better for the Greens. They have, if we take into account the current government formations and elections, the Greens are basically only represented again only in Lithuania and Latvia, and have lost basically government participation in every other member state where they used to be in government. This is a huge loss in support for these parties. How can you explain these developments?
Well, let's take the social democracy first. Social democracy is nothing like what it used to be. It's pretty much given up on its own traditional base, so it no longer makes the slightest pretense to be the spokesman of the working class. The working class has moved to the right almost everywhere in quite substantial numbers. And social democracy has essentially become, in most places, a party of the professionals, the lawyers, the school principals within the public sector, and therefore its base is very, very narrow. And having lost its base, it's no longer got any distinctive voice to represent. When looking at social democracy, it's acquired this very centrist, technocratic character, a depoliticized technocratic character, which basically means that it hasn't got the capacity to mobilize new sectors of society. The Greens have got a very similar problem, compounded by the fact that all of the centrist parties, like Social Democrats or even the CDU, have taken up a lot of green issues. So they're indistinguishable from the Greens because they all bought into this often very irrational green kind of political program. And the problem that the Greens have is that in the past they were able to mobilize the younger voters. they were able to represent these new values that the young people wanted. Whereas now it's a different generation of youth who are much as, or just as likely to vote for right-wing parties as it is to vote for the Greens. So the Greens are in trouble everywhere. And I think that's on balance, a very interesting development. It basically means that the political mainstream is decomposed. Because I would argue that this development is much more striking within social democracy and the Greens, but I think all of the conservative parties are also suffering from a similar kind of problem.
And to ask for your outlook on the European level of this developments in Germany, but also on the shifting majorities in European politics, what policies might change through this? Will this have any actual consequence in new policies or something substantially changing for the average European citizen?
No. And I think the reason for that is this. I think for the last 20 years, almost all the policies have not been a reaction to popular demand. Mass migration didn't come about because the people demanded it. The green agenda didn't come about because people were on the streets asking for it. These are all policies from above. And I think that culture where policy making is the accomplishment of a very small number of people, and then people are kind of confronted with it, is not going to change anytime soon, because within the European Commission, there's a very powerful impulse towards retaining that sort of monopoly over policy making. So I think in the short run, nothing as much is going to be done other than they're making a lot of noises about controlling migration. Everybody will say we'll control migration. I predict that that will be just words rather than deeds. Even if they pass new laws and policies, they will also promise us that the disastrous economic consequences of the Green Deal is going to be slowed down or mitigated against. And that might happen a little bit, but it's not so strongly in place that will take a long time for this to get sorted out. So I think in the immediate period, not much will change, but what will change is the political climate. I think that the mood will change quite a bit, and it will create more opportunities for people to mobilize against these very kind of technocratic, culturally disastrous policies that have been institutionalized.
So then the obvious last question is what to do about it. And to coming back to your comments about media, maybe the solution is to develop more and more alternative media formats to gain more and more influence, not only among the general public, but among the decision makers, as you say. Is this the way forward?
I think that that's the central question, because at the moment, the way that politics appears in public is entirely determined by what the media decides are the issues. They select what is news and what isn't the news. And they've done this very successfully for a very, very long time. Now they're losing their monopoly, because with the new media, the legacy media is no longer in this monopoly position. And it seems to me that the key challenge for parties, conservative parties, populist parties, is to develop their own media so that they can reach a larger number of people. I think if they can do that in the way that, for example, Trump did in the United States, they can make much greater headway, and they can, sort of force the media, the old media, on the defensive, which is what we would like to see. And once that occurs, then a larger section of society will have access to a different flow of information than is the case at the moment.
Yeah, and we here at MCC Brussels will contribute to this surely at European level in the future, I guess.
We better do that, otherwise we're wasting our time.
So it seems there are still many big questions left on the table about the future of Germany, not least which way will this next election go. So make sure you stay with MCC Brussels, both here on the podcast and also at our events, where in the run-up to the election next year and in its wake, we'll be bringing you all of the news and analysis.